I had a long day in the lab, so I'm going to keep this one short, to the point. Long story short, my buddy Sam Pura, he's an awesome producer, mixing engineer, drummer. He sent me his new plugin called Liquid Death to try out in a mix and to see what my thoughts were. So this video, I'm going to go over what some of the features are of this new plugin that he's releasing and what my take is on how it sounds and if I think it's usable. And I'm going to share with you some secrets that I found toying with this a little bit that I really think are going to help you make the best out of this plugin. Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Bobby Balo, and I'm the mixing and mastering engineer at Raytown Productions. If you like plugins, I have something very special for you. In the description is a link to download a guide that has all of my favorite mixing and mastering plugins. Compressors, limiters, distortion, echoes, delays, reverbs, all sorts of stuff, including some really legit samples that's going to help you make better music. So if that sounds interesting to you, go in the description, check it out, maybe download that. I don't know, use it in your next song. It should inspire some creativity. The session I'm going to showcase this on is from a band called Deer Spring, and this is an older album that I mixed and mastered a while ago, but it's still a cool track, and I think it'll really showcase this snare. So first thing you need to know, this is a plugin, but it's actually a virtual instrument. So to load up Liquid Death, you actually have to instantiate a new virtual instrument. So in Cubase, you just add an instrument here, and we're going to add the Liquid Death snare, and I'm just going to route this to my snare bus. Okay, then we add the track, and whammo, we have the Liquid Death snare. Look at this thing. So kudos to the graphic interface designer, because this thing looks amazing. I love the way it looks. It's really simplistic. I think they did a nice job so that anybody can just grab this plugin and just start going with it. There's a few cool features that I think are a little bit unique to this plugin. One is the ability to completely disengage all of the multi-velocity samples and just do one-shots. And what one-shots are is simply just the same drum sample being repeated over and over and over. Sometimes that's really cool if you want the exact same sound from a more robotic kind of vibe to it, or there's a certain part of a song that you want to sound exactly the same every single drum hit. You can just engage this on and off. Something to note is, and maybe this will be addressed in an update or something, but this parameter isn't automatable, which is something I kind of wish I would have seen, just in case like you get to a really heavy part of the song and you want it just to be one shots every single time. It'd be kind of cool to be able to automate this on and off. But to be honest, you're probably just going to want to program your drums to do rim shots every time for that part, and that you can do over here by just putting the MIDI notes on a different lane. And so we'll talk about that in a second. You'll see that there's this giant big old tuning knob here, which is pretty cool. So you can tune it from a low C to a middle C to a high C. Now, what's interesting about tuning drums is that, technically speaking, drums are relatively atonal, so they don't have a definite pitch. They're actually the sum of a lot of different pitches. So on the most technical side, it's very difficult to tune to an exact pitch. However, that doesn't mean you can't tune it to what you would perceive as the general note or tone of the snare drum or tom or kick drum, for that matter. And so what Sam has done is he's painstakingly tuned the drums to these notes by ear. Okay, so they are tuned to what a human would consider C2 or, let's say, C3 or any of these different tunings. If you want to hear what the snare drum sounds like, you can just click on this big old picture of a snare drum in the middle. And you can hear it sounds pretty legit, right? And if you change the tuning, here it gets lower. Then it gets really low. Awesome. And then we go higher. I mean, that's really tight, right? Overall, it's a pretty legit sounding snare right off the bat. Over in this mapping section, we have the ability to route to whatever note we want for the corresponding style of drum hit. So if you're going for a really aggressive rim shot, it's mapped to D1. If you're doing a flam, it's E1, or the multi-velocity layers of this snare drum is mapped to F1. So if you are doing snare rolls or something like that, you're going to want to put those on this mapping key, okay? And you can change this. So if you have a certain drum program that you use to program drums, you can just change it to whatever note is your preferred note. Or you can hit the MIDI learn button, play the snare MIDI note that you've already programmed, and it will detect it and then add it right to the mapping automatically. So it's a nice, quick way of getting this thing up and running. In terms of the overall mics and everything, we have top mic, bottom mic, shell mic, this U47, which is kind of like a mono room mic, I think is what the intention is for this. And then you have overheads, which gives a nice stereo sound, close mics, and then far. So let's just go over those quickly. Okay, so let's listen to it. Here's the top mic. Bottom. Shell. U47. And to me, that just sounds like a mono room mic. Sounds pretty cool, though. Overheads. It's got a cool width to it, and it's the mid or the chunk of the snare is definitely centered in the stereo image, which is super important. Let's listen to the close mics. Okay, so that's close room mics, and then we'll listen to the far ones. So that's cool. That's almost like a chamber style effect there. I think if you had this and you slammed it with a compressor, you could probably get a really cool movement to your drum kit. Down here, you can route all these different mics to different channels. So if you're like me and you want them all separated out so that you can apply different effects and then print all these audio files down and mangle them however you want, you just simply go and change the outputs for each one of these so that they're on their own track, and then you can essentially render down this instrument, and then you have a full breakdown of every single one of these mics on separate tracks, so you have complete control over everything. So that's super helpful. And I'm just going to leave this all on one because I think it sounds pretty awesome just as it's routed. And if you have a desire to change the polarity of any of these mics, you can just click on the polarity button here, and it'll invert the polarity for you. Now, I do want to point something out, because when I demoed this plugin, I noticed something that I haven't noticed on other plugins before. And when I was changing the tuning on this, you can feel that certain notes have this like magic punch to them. Like they just feel better than some of the other tunings. And it didn't sound kind of synthetic, if that makes sense. The drum actually sounded differently at these different tunings. And I'm not talking sounded differently like it was tuned differently, like it had a different feel to it. And with a lot of drum sampling programs, that's not the case, because the way those work are by taking the pitch and just tuning it down. So you get the same character of the drum, just lowered down digitally, and it doesn't really have the same feeling as this particular snare. When you tune this down, the drums feel differently. And if this was tuned down, what you would see in the frequency spectrum is that all the ambience is also being pitched down and lower. Okay, so to prove this to you, I actually have this is called a spectrogram. This is just basically the frequency response, like a normal spectrum analyzer, but you're gonna also get it over time. Okay, so the highest frequencies of our spectrum analyzer are up here for the left channel and right here for the right. So when we hit play, here is the fundamental of our snare, and then as it gets to a light blue, that's a lower amount of those frequencies. So if I loop this and we just hit the snare drum a bunch, you have the most frequencies right here. This is the punch, and then it's pretty solid all the way through here. If we were to pitch shift this, all those frequencies would shift lower and lower and lower in that error band up here, okay? Watch what happens when I change the tuning. Okay, we're looking up here at the spectrogram, okay? It looks exactly the same in all three of those tunings, and then the body of the snare, where we have these red and yellow, where it's the loudest, that is what's moving up and down, right? Here we have this big punch right there, and if we drop it down, you can see how it's shifting lower, but the top part of the frequency spectrum is staying the same, okay? We can go all the way down the whole way. Okay, see that? This is actually sampled at each one of these different tunings. And a reason why a lot of drum sampling programs don't do that is because it's a lot of work. So I'm really impressed by the fact that they didn't gloss over this detail and they actually literally tuned it differently. And also, just want to point this out, you'll notice that there's not one fundamental pitch here, okay? So that also means that this does not have definite pitch, so it really doesn't have a note, even though we can perceive a note, okay? Just some weird, nerdy stuff. So I made some notes when I was playing with this, and I found a sweet spot to be right around F sharp 2. So up here, down to about E2. So this just has a nice crack to it. That also feels pretty good. And that E2 sounds pretty awesome to me. And then also A down here sounded pretty amazing. If you're going for that nice, powerful cannon style snare. And something that I'm glad you guys decided to do, you got rid of all of the ring out of the snare. Now, some people love ring. I really fight with ringy snares all the time. I tend to really compress my snares so that they really slam hard against the speakers. So every time I do that with a sampled drum that has a noticeable ring to it, that ring comes swelling in and it's annoying to have to gate or chop up those samples. These are the most focused snare drum samples I've literally ever heard. If you listen to it, like if I put this top snare mic on, tell me where the ring is. I mean, you hear the body of the snare drum and the attack, and then that is it. There is no ringing, period. Love it. So let me quickly throw this into a mix so we can hear how it sounds. So to do that using real samples, if you're in Cubase, it's super easy. You're just going to click on your snare track and go to hit points. We're going to edit our hit points, adjust our threshold so that it's being triggered by each one of these transients on the drums. And then you can literally go to Create, MIDI Notes, and we want it C1 because we want it to be a dynamic velocity, okay? Hit OK. So I'm just going to dial this in. I really like this overhead. It gives it like a nice presence to this snare and a lot of width. And again, remember, I am just literally not, but I normally would bust these all out to different tracks and everything. I just threw this all on the same channel just to see how good it sounds, and it's already sounding pretty good. And it's holding up in a really, really dense mix. So it's still a little loud in the mix. Okay, I just rolled off a little bit of the really bassy stuff, put a little bump around 200 or 150. I just like that powerful snare drum sound. Let's try a quieter part to see how it fills in the ambience. So here it is soloed again. Bring it back with the song. So let's pretend there's a snare roll here, because I'm always curious how these things sound with snare rolls, right? So here I just did a bunch of 30-second notes just to see if we can hear what, like, how it reacts to snare roll or something like that. where, you know, if you have a lot of similar velocity layers going at the same time, you might run out or start repeating samples. So let's see how it holds up. I mean, it sounds pretty believable, I think. Nice. Yeah. Good work, guys. Now, I just made this up, so it's not going to sound good in the song, but let's hear it in the context of the song. I feel like we need to lower these. They're just being hit too hard. Yeah, I think it's super usable. I think you'd be able to program drums and it would have a good feel the entire way through it, where you're not going to run into issues with snare rolls or anything like that. And the fact that they also have the flams, rim shots, like, I think you're in a good spot. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Sam Pura's new Liquid Death Snare plugin. I think it sounds pretty legit. It's super tight and really punchy. And I'm hoping this plugin sets the new standard for all the other people that do drum sampling technology, to not just kind of take the cheap way out and just pitch shift all of the drums down, but instead to go and take the time to actually record them at the different tunings, because I really do think it makes a significant difference. And it was legitimately noticeable to me when I played with this, because I think this is the first plugin that I've personally used, and I've used a lot of plugins, that actually has done it this way. If you want to check out this plugin, I have links in the description below, so click on those, head over there, check it out, and see what you think. Now, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think this plugin sounds legit or not? Are there other drum sampling plugins that you use that actually have different samples for each different tuning? I haven't heard of it, but if you know something, also drop that in the comments below. I'd love to hear that. If you want to learn more tricks about mixing and mastering, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I drop a new video every single week, and I tend to go pretty nerdy, so if you like what you saw here, you're definitely going to like my channel. If you want to support me in this channel, the easiest thing you can do is just hit that share button and share this video or some of my other videos with your friends, or to groups on social networks like Facebook or Reddit. I want to remind you to go and grab my free download in the description for all of my favorite free mixing and mastering plugins. And I only have the best ones on there, so I promise you it's probably going to be worth it to check it out. And with that, I want to thank you so much for your time and attention today. My name is Bobby Balo, and I hope to see you in another video.